welcome back to the Prospecting Show. Today is July 9th, 2020. We have Brandon Patterson on the call. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So for the people who end up listening to the show, I always have this little intro here where I say what the show is about. We're looking at the past, the present, and the future. And before we got on the call here, we talked specifically about you and how you want to focus more on the future here because you have some predictions and some ideas about what the world's going to look like, not only post-COVID, but also what the world's going to look like as we transition from standard banking and standard financing in the United States over to crypto-backed and crypto-based financing. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time on the show here talking about what you've done, but then we're going to quickly transition into where you think things are going to go and some of the trends that you're seeing. So first question for you. Where did you come from, and kind of give us a background on who you are and what your specialty is?
Sure. As we had discussed before, I came up through Case Western Reserve University with a degree in computer engineering and immediately went into IT consulting with some of the large consulting firms. I worked for two of those over the course of several years and focused mainly on Oracle applications and ERP systems and the integration of those systems with all the legacy systems, solving our customers' problems. At one point in time, I decided to leave consulting and move into independent contracting, where I worked for some smaller firms and did more IT project management across the entire spectrum of IT, from low-level network deployment the whole way through to application design and development. And in the midst of all that, cryptocurrency came onto my radar in about 2013, where I immediately started mining. And then after a few months of mining, I realized, it's a lot easier just to buy this on exchanges. So I started trading and have followed it pretty much daily since then. And I listen to multiple podcasts and have a lot of different ideas from a crypto perspective of how industries can be changed and affected by cryptocurrency, and also how it will influence our future as we move forward into the new world that COVID-19 has created.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, right? Because you have some of this experience. In your past roles, you've been doing some of these consulting and IT-based roles and jobs and consultancies. What did you see in that space that led you to crypto? Like, what was that tipping point? How did you get introduced to the cryptocurrency world?
So actually, it wasn't directly through consulting. It was on my own. I had read an article in Laptop Magazine in 2013, and that's what opened the world up to me. And then I started looking for ways that I could apply that to the consulting work I was doing. But unfortunately, at that time in the ERP space, there really wasn't an avenue to connect the cryptocurrency world and the Oracle ERP system at the time. And it just wasn't popular enough to be used. Now, I think a lot of companies are looking into blockchain technology or implementing it. I know some of the largest banks in the country, including PNC, are already using it. PNC's been messing with it since 2016 with XRP also. So at that point, then I started trying to consume about anything I could from the cryptocurrency perspective. And one of the first things I got into, other than mining and buying Bitcoin and Litecoin, was looking at XRP and the possibilities of moving fiat currency from point A to B, specifically across borders, through their RippleNet system. And from there, it just kind of blossomed into a dozen or more other cryptocurrencies that I kept learning about every time I did another Google search.
Yeah, and for the people who end up listening to this, there's going to be a large portion of people who don't really know what the blockchain is and what cryptocurrency is, and Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin and all these things. So give us kind of like the 411 on your understanding and your specialty, in the blockchain space and solving some of those math-based problems, but then also in the crypto space and talking about Bitcoin and Litecoin. Break that down for us.
Sure. So the easiest thing to understand at first is a blockchain. And basically think of it as a book. And each block in the blockchain has a reference to the next page in the book and the previous page in the book. And each block contains the transactions that occurred during that time. The miner's job is to verify all the transactions in a current block. And the first one to do so then says, I've validated every transaction. Here's the next block. And it sends it out. So that's sort of the way the blockchain works. The transactions occur in any number of ways using the different cryptocurrencies. And specifically, there's a blockchain for Bitcoin, there's a blockchain for Ethereum, there's a blockchain for XRP, which is Ripple Labs cryptocurrency. Same thing goes with pretty much every other cryptocurrency. Now, Bitcoin was originally created, at least from my perspective, as a store of value. It was designed to be a currency. Other cryptocurrencies have a project behind them. So for instance, when I talk about Ripple Labs XRP, the idea there was to facilitate cross-border transactions of fiat currency. When you look at Stellar, which is pretty much backed by IBM right now, their idea is to do consumer transactions, move money from person A to person B. All of this is sort of based on the same underlying technology of blockchain, and each cryptocurrency, as I said before, has its own blockchain. But the difference is Bitcoin was supposed to be a store of value, i.e. internet gold, and the other ones all have some type of project behind them. I'll give you another example. Tardigrade is a decentralized storage solution, which is taking on folks like Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services. So there's a whole spectrum of different projects out there and different cryptocurrencies. I think the last count, there's over 5,000 of them at this point.
Yeah, and so you talked a little bit about decentralization. So again, for the people who maybe have heard that term and kind of associate it with blockchain and some of these coins, what actually is the theory of decentralization?
So decentralization, there's kind of two parts to it here. There's distributed networks and there's decentralized networks. And basically what we're doing is with blockchain, which is a hybrid of the two, you are pushing the processing out to the nodes on the network rather than having a centralized server that does all the processing for you. And then part two of this is you have multiple connections and multiple paths between any node on the network. And a node could be something as small as somebody running a PC at home that's running a node for a particular blockchain. And what happens is the processing is pushed out to the nodes, and the nodes communicate directly with each other without a centralized server in the middle. So this thing operates essentially autonomously from a centralized solution, and thus takes control away from any central authority. So when you think about Bitcoin, Bitcoin has no government that controls it. It is decentralized and distributed. Whereas the US dollar has the Fed behind it, right? And any other country, they have their central bank system that controls their individual fiat currency. So cryptocurrency takes the power away from those authorities, and that's some of the reason the governments dislike it. And one of the reasons that the US government was scared to death when Facebook announced Libra, because suddenly you had a company that has a user base of 2.3 billion people that are about to start using a cryptocurrency which would take the power away from the central banks. And that's why it came under such scrutiny as soon as it was announced, or actually leaked before it was announced.
And so to kind of go down that pathway, I mean, I know there's not tons of information on it. I mean, there's some speculation and whatnot. Maybe break down what the Libra looks like. I know it's a coin, and it's something that is blockchain focused. In your words, what are they trying to do? Like, what's the solution that Facebook is trying to create there, and how does that coin work?
Well, Libra is really stalled at this point, from what I understand. It got caught up in a lot of government regulation. But in general, and at a simple level, Facebook wanted to create their own coin to be able to move money and make payments through their own system. The problem with that from the government standpoint was they have such a massive user base. In fact, more people have Facebook accounts than are committed to Christianity, actually. I think it's 2.3 billion to 2.2 billion, believe it or not. So it was simply an alternative to the US dollar. However, it had such a large user base that it could really take power away from the US government immediately. Now, the investors behind it, and I admit it's been a while since I read the white paper on this, there was a very lucrative scheme for the folks that were going to fund this project. And when some of the big companies signed on, I believe some of the credit card companies and various other technology companies signed up for it, their, I guess, prospect to make money on this thing was unbelievable, because they were going to make money on the people that were putting money into the system, and they would earn interest on everybody else's fiat currency while it was sitting in there being held for the Libra that they had in their wallets. So I think that probably was an issue as well. But right now, Libra is pretty much caught up in a lot of government framework, as far as I know, or government red tape, and is not really moving forward at this point, unfortunately.
And since you seem to be having a positive outlook on, you know, blockchain applications and really the currencies, right, like the actual Bitcoins and Ethereums and potentially Libra as time goes on, you know, there hasn't been an adoptability so far kind of US wide or, you know, worldwide, right? There's some people who still haven't bought into the whole blockchain concept. There's some people who haven't bought into cryptocurrency and all that. So where do you see the adoption of this in the marketplace? Do you think it requires everybody to buy in? I mean, the US dollar only works because everyone within the country has agreed that, hey, that's our currency. Where do you see the kind of hiccups right now in the cryptocurrency space?
The biggest one right now, if you talk about using Bitcoin as a payment method, is the number of transactions it can do. It can't handle tens of millions of transactions per second, which is one of the big things that they have to solve. There are some other problems, nothing that major, but about block size and things like that. But really, when it comes down to it, if you think about it, why would you want to store your value in a currency that can be controlled by a government and can be devalued by a government? I mean, think about your US dollar right now. Now, granted, US dollars are the currency of business. And if you're going to make a business transaction right now, it doesn't matter where you're from, it's likely it's going to be transacted in US dollars. But the fact remains, the US government has just printed trillions of dollars, literally just printed them. And for now, we're propping up our businesses, the stock market, our citizens with money that has just been printed. And essentially we've devalued our own currency. It just hasn't, or people just haven't realized it yet for some reason. Something like a Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other cryptocurrencies, they are not controlled by a government. So they can't be, you can't just print more Bitcoin and it can't be devalued like that. And because of the way it's produced, Bitcoin is technically a deflationary currency. So over the long term, your Bitcoin should be worth more every time less is produced. So every 4 years, there's what's called a halving. And when I was explaining about miners validating the transactions in a block a few minutes ago, by validating all the transactions in a block and being the first one to do that, the miners get a reward. Now that in May of 2020, that reward dropped from 12.5 Bitcoins to 6.25 Bitcoins. In approximately May of 2024, that reward will halve again. And when you start producing less and less of an asset, and you have the same amount of money flowing into the market, then that should be good for the asset, and the asset should increase in value. The biggest thing is we have to have a parallel system that uses only cryptocurrency. So for instance, if you wanted to really switch, we need a business that can create its own business, build the building, buy whatever systems it needs, pay the electricity bills, and accept cryptocurrency as the method of payment. So it needs to be able to use crypto for everything it needs, and it needs to be able to accept it as payment. It would be a wonderful thing to be able to do that today, but I don't think it's quite possible yet. There's going to be a transition as businesses start accepting cryptocurrency, and somebody large like Amazon already has. I believe you can use Bitcoin and Ethereum right now on Amazon to make purchases, and you've been able to do that on Overstock for years, and a lot of other businesses as well. But they're in a transition phase, and where that transition will end up, nobody really knows at this point, because Bitcoin may or may not be the end solution. There may be something else that comes along that is better in the future, but At this point, we don't have that yet. So think of it that we're in a transition phase, and eventually we'll get to a point where we will hopefully be transacting all in crypto. At least that would be my belief and hope.
Yeah, and so do you have any, I think a lot of people who look at crypto in the beginning, and some of the government and regulatory agencies are looking at it and saying, well, historically, these currencies have been used for illegal activity, right? Buying stuff online that, is not traceable, not trackable. A lot of other things have happened that, unlike the US dollar, it can't be tracked. So do you think that some of the adoptability is going to come down to whether or not people believe that the currency will be used maliciously?
Well, it has been used maliciously in the past, but ironically, that's the thing that actually gave it credibility, that it could be used as a means of transferring value. Now, contrary to popular belief, every single transaction that's on the blockchain, especially when we talk about Bitcoin, can be viewed and can be tracked. So we know where it's come from and where it's going to. It's not something that every single person can do. There are tools to watch this, but it's not anonymous like people think it is. Now, on the flip side, one of the things that blockchain technology is enabling is actually private messaging. So there are new messaging services that have just come out. Status is one of them, and DChat, which is being propagated by Unstoppable Domains, are completely private messaging services where you can control it, nobody has access to it, and it goes away when you're done with it. So it's enabling privacy in areas where we want privacy, and it is providing transparency in areas where we really do want and need transparency.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that slant, I think, comes down to the education, right? I asked that question there, and obviously a lack of understanding of how it's working. Do you see a future where there are multiple coins that are, standardly accepted? I know, like you said, there's 5,000 different options right now, but obviously not all 5,000 could be the currency in all countries all the time. I don't see that being practical. The US can barely handle one currency, never mind bringing in things like the Canadian dollar, right? So how are they going to handle multiple coins?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think in the long term, it's going to come down to probably one coin that will be used as a global standard. Maybe that's Bitcoin, maybe not. I think there will be other coins used for special purposes. For instance, Ethereum, yes, you can purchase things with Ethereum right now. You can send and receive Ethereum to other people. But the true purpose was to be fuel, to fuel the smart contracts on the Ethereum network. That may continue to be the case, and Ethereum may continue to be the fuel on its network and possibly used as a store of value as well. But I don't think we are going to have hundreds of coins that are used to transact and make purchases around the world. That would completely defeat the purpose. The idea would be to have one coin that you can use anywhere in the world. Think of how nice that would be, that if I had to go to Europe for business and I walk into a pub and I want to buy lunch, I just scan the QR code and I pay in Bitcoin. I don't have to worry about an exchange rate. I don't have to look up currency conversions when I file my expense report for business. It's just, oh, you spent 0.0001 Bitcoin or whatever it was on lunch. No conversion necessary.
And do you think that there will be, this is something that I've kind of been thinking about recently, is like, do you think there will be a time where they revalue the Bitcoin? One of the weird things about it is that it's, you have a 0.00001, whatever against the US dollar. And so it's such a small number. Do you think they will restructure that into a more meaningful number for people going forward?
Well, I would hope that they is a vague term. I would hope that Bitcoins are no longer pegged to the US dollar in the future. I would like to see Bitcoin be the universal currency rather than denoting it in US dollars. Everything is denoted in Bitcoin or whatever the universal crypto will be for the world at that point in time.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And so the issue right now, you're saying, when there's this very small number of Bitcoin, it's kind of hard to interpret mentally. You're saying that's mostly because it's pegged against the US dollar, but you're saying that if it's decentralized and and is not pegged against any one particular coin or one particular currency around the world, that it will no longer have that kind of value.
Right. And this goes back to what I was saying about parallel systems. So right now we have an economic system in the United States based on the US dollar. Europe has an economic system based on the euro, China on the yuan. If we had another quote unquote system where a business was able to buy everything it needed in Bitcoins and take in Bitcoins or cryptocurrency of any kind and completely transact in crypto and never have to convert back to fiat, that's where you start breaking away from these government controlled fiat currencies.
Got it. And for, an explanation, what is a fiat currency?
So fiat would be the US dollar, the European euro, anything like that. It's just basically what we're used to using every day in our lives.
Got it. So and I was just looking this up as we were talking. It sounds like the reason they call it a fiat currency is that it's really the US dollar, the piece of paper that is the $5 bill is not actually worth $5, right? It's just pegged to a value, kind of like what you're talking about. So that makes it a fiat currency, it sounds like. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, exactly. If you think about what a US dollar really is, the value of it is backed by the full faith of the US taxpayer, or the full faith and credit, I think, of the US taxpayer. But that goes along with our ability to pay taxes. And if you look at the situation we're in right now with almost 40 million people out of work, the government basically paying everybody and us printing more money or US dollars in order to pay those people, what is that tax base really worth anymore? Without producing things, we don't have an economic basis for our currency. And going forward,
it's certainly complicated, right? Like, it's one of those ones where it's right now people are definitely concerned about the fact that they're printing money. But I guess the one thing that is somewhat beneficial is that the US is not the only country printing money right now, right? If you look at the US CAD pegged rate, you would have thought that with all the money the US printed, that the Canadian dollar would be substantially stronger against the US because of, devaluing the US dollar. But guess what? Canada printed a bunch of money too. So relatively speaking, they're still similar in value. I don't know what it is, as of this recording, but it's probably like, $1.38 Canadian buys you $1 US, right? Something like that, maybe even higher. But you see things like the Dow Jones rise and fall and tank and come back up pretty quickly. But with the US currency, it's still the relative currencies like the CAD are still kind of the same value. Do you see that still happening with Bitcoin and Ethereum and some of these other coins that are going to be new currencies?
Yeah, well, that's just it. Everything's relative right now. Like you said, everybody's printing currency, so we're all kind of on the same level. With a crypto that is not connected to any specific government, that's not controlled by any government, really the value should not be pegged to any fiat currency. So it should really break out of that mold. But right now, I think we're in such an early phase of the crypto life cycle that we're still finding our way through this a little bit. And people are trying to connect crypto to fiat or other markets when it is a completely, blue ocean here. It's a greenfield opportunity that has yet to come into its own. It's still developing, right? So we will learn more as it goes forward. And if it does break away from the fiat currencies, then that changes everything. Yeah.
So to kind of wrap things up here, give us like the one or two things that you think are going to happen going forward at a high level, and then what, how people can get educated on what you're doing and kind of learn more about, maybe a resource or two that you think is useful.
Sure. Absolutely. So I think we are in a situation where life has changed permanently. There's no going back to the way life was in 2019. And because of that, everything has changed about the way we are going to live our lives. And crypto, I think, is going to be a big part of that moving forward in the future. You think about where you put your money, right? Do you want to put it in gold? Well, I can't really drag gold around with me in my pocket, and I can't pay for anything. Yeah, it's been a traditional store of value, but why? if you look at something like a Bitcoin, it's more portable, it's more usable, it's more accessible than gold is. And then if you think about the fiat currencies, well, then we've already discussed that at length. We are not going to go back to offices in the future. We have had the capability to work from home for years. I mean, I was doing it 20 years ago as an Oracle Applications DPA. I know from a friend's company who was on a call with the CEO. They said 70% of their employees are never going to set foot in an office again. At least that's their prediction at this point in time. And this is a huge, huge company. So we've got a huge effect on commercial real estate coming up. Our life has changed, and we have to accept the fact that we have to live things differently and in a new way going forward. So we have to accept that and move forward and look at it as an opportunity rather than a problem. The problem is COVID-19, and we needed a vaccine for that. It's changed our lives, and we've come into an environment that we have been able to support for years, but now COVID has pushed us into actually doing that and changing our entire business model. So I think we all have to realize that and accept it and move forward with things the way they are right now and look at this as the new reality. As far as cryptocurrency goes, I consume news on crypto from multiple sources, but some of the easiest for folks to follow originally would be something like a CoinDesk or CoinMarketCap. Those are some places where you can get some really great information. I've been a fan of Epicenter Bitcoin's podcast going way back to the beginning when I first got into cryptocurrency in like the 2013, 2014 timeframe. So those are some great places for anybody to start. And then from there, as you read through articles or listen to podcasts, you'll just keep learning more and more, and you'll find references to more sources from there, and it will just continue to grow. So you have lots of places to look for information.
And is there anywhere in particular that people can find you if they want to reach out, kind of learn a little bit more about what you're doing on the consulting side and kind of, any of this information here? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you talked about, and you seem to be very experienced in these areas. What's the best way for somebody to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am on LinkedIn, searchable under my name on LinkedIn, Brandon Patterson. I am currently moving my company's website from the traditional web over to a crypto domain. So it's going to be JD International. The domain name will be JDEEINTL.crypto, CRYPTO. And that will be accessible by the end of this month. So it takes a little work to get that moved over there. Those are the basic ways to contact me. Email address, bpatterson@jdeintl.com. And that's basically it.
Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the Prospecting Show, talking a little bit about your background, the future of money and crypto and all these different coins and kind of the direction that things are going. It'll be interesting over the next probably 6 to 18 months to see how the world develops and how it changes post-COVID. Are we going to print more money? Are we going to start raising taxes? Are we going to change the way that people do things? Are we going to transition into this more online kind of model where people are using crypto instead of, a pegged dollar like the USD? So I appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your wisdom and teaching us about blockchain and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on the show.